Nigeria has been trying without much success to subdue an insurgency within our borders for more than 10 years. The cost of that war, both in human and material terms, runs into billions of dollars. Thousands of Nigerians have been killed, either through soldiers lost in battle or civilians caught in the crossfire. In the past couple of years, that situation has become more complicated and a lot more dangerous, owing to the involvement of dislodged terrorist elements from elsewhere in the world, as well as a continuous flow of cross-border bandits, many of them from some of Nigeria's northernmost neighbors. An attempt to quell this crisis has been the major preoccupation of the Nigerian military for the length of that period. But now, the United Nations is recommending a change in tactics that will include increased exploration of political options in conflict resolution and greater diplomatic engagement. However, this proposal has been met by mixed reactions by analysts and indeed a wide spectrum of Nigerians who have been made to suffer the debilitating consequence of the activities of these non-state actors for more than a decade. Joining us now from our Rise Abuja studio to look at the practicability or otherwise of the United Nations recommendation is Jideofor Adibe, Professor of International Relations and Political Science at the Nasarawa State University in Kefi. Professor Adibe, good morning and welcome to the morning show. It's good to have you again.
My brother Ruben.
It's good to have you again on the morning
good morning.
show.
How now?
Well, I do, as they say.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, quickly, the United Nations resident coordinator was in the villa recently to meet with President Buhari. And when he spoke with the media crew at the villa, he made a point that Nigeria needs to explore a political solution to the crisis of insurgency in the northeastern part of the country, particularly as he pointed out that, there are many dimensions to the crisis: identity-based conflict, resource-based conflict, and, other considerations. What are your thoughts on this? I do not imagine that Mr. Kalon was recommending that the Nigerian government should go and negotiate with terrorists, because that would be unlike something that will come from the United Nations.
Thank you very much, Ruben. The only reason why this became an issue is because it came from the United Nations. Several individuals have actually in the past been saying that purely military action will be insufficient to quell the insurgencies and the banditry in northern part of the country. In fact, as early as 2018, the Canadian Endowment for International Peace published a report about the Northeast, which we call the challenges of reintegration, in which it explicitly called for a multi-pronged approach that will go beyond purely military solution. Even the Nigerian state itself has tried. Nigerian current approach is multi-pronged. I give you an example. I am sure you recall that early this year, it became a very big news when it was reported that the Nigerian government released 1,400 repentant terrorists as repentant Boko Haram activists. Many Nigerians were very angry about it. But that was part of what we call the de-radicalization program. As a matter of fact, the Nigerian government, we currently have 3 de-radicalization programs going pari passu. You have, for example, the one that is operating in Kuje prison, which targets, hardcore combatants and those who have been convicted or facing trials. And what they were trying to do is to de-radicalize them and give them soft trainings that will help them to be reintegrated into the society. And then also you have what they call the Yellow Ribbon Initiative, which is being run in Borno State by a foundation known as the Neem Tree Foundation. And then you have the 2016, the popular government one, which targets repentant Boko Haram activists. So there has never really been a time that a purely military solution was used. I'm sure you recall in 2016, El-Rufai came on the wrong side of many people when he said he paid money to some Fulani people, traced them to their countries, and paid them money to stop them from attacking some places in southern Kaduna. That's also a multi-pronged approach. In December 2016, the governor Masari of Katsina State reached a deal with the bandits. And it's only in June recently that he said he was pulling out of it because they disappointed him. In Zamfara State, the governor of Zamfara State currently has an arrangement with the bandits. It was an arrangement, and he said he had no regrets. So it's it's always been multi-pronged. So it's just because it came from the United Nations that it seemed to be something new. And it just reminds one of what they call the illicit gene complex. It's always been there, multi-pronged.
Well, when you look at the situation of the insecurity across the northern region of the country, and you look at this existing multi-pronged approach you talk about, wouldn't you say that they have hit roadblocks and they have been unsuccessful?
Well, there is one thing Callan mentioned, which maybe he used a different terminology than we will use, than conflict scholars will use. He said there are different layers, and each will require different solution. Conflict scholars will talk about nested theories of conflict, in which there are layers of conflict. Some conflicts will arise as a result, relational, resulting from the way people interact. You have to deal with that separately. You also have the ones that we can call systemic. Let's say, for example, Nigeria, resulting from the way the constituent elements interact. You also have maybe one you can call subsystem, maybe within political parties. If political parties are having their own issues, that's also conflict. Then they have to devise systems and ways of resolving their own conflict. So we cannot, just because the one in Northeast has persisted, say that they have all failed. In some places they've failed, they've succeeded. If you look at some of the crises in some political parties, if you look at the crisis over environmental resources, that is at the sub-regional level, like clashes over chieftaincy tools in Southwest or land issues in the Southeast, some of them have succeeded. But I agree with him, there have been an interaction. I agree with Edward Callon. There have been some kind of complex interactions in the conflict in the Northeast, because then is a combination of the struggle over environmental resources with the idea of a number of people and groups delinking from the Nigerian state and regarding the state as an enemy. There is also this issue of failure of governance and the issue of ungoverned spaces. Certain swaths of territories that governance has not permeated. And then, of course, you have the poverty issue. So there is a complex, there is an interaction that even though a conflict might have its origin in disaffection in one area or the other, it mutates so that it becomes independent of the original causative element. So that's why I think what he meant by saying that it's complex, and I agree with him, it's complex, but that doesn't mean that there will not be a solution. There can be a solution, and some solutions have been found. The only thing as the conflicts mutate, you have to keep pace with your own strategies, and that's actually one of the things I feel is wrong with our conflict management strategies. We tend to use fire brigade approach. We wait until the conflicts have mutated, so that it becomes now difficult to isolate and say this is the cause. And if you look at take example, the herdsmen farmers crisis, it interacts with ethnic and religious dimensions. So even though it was originally a struggle over environmental resources, it's no longer there. You cannot just say, oh, now go and create a grazing reserve that will solve the problem. No, because now it's mutated, it's interacted with other elements, and you have to see it. For us to be able to have that capacity to deal effectively with such conflicts means that you have to be one step ahead of the game at all times.
Right. I want to know the role the economy plays in all of this. I mean, the economic disposition of these people in this area, because if there's a talk about a political solution, how about the economic viability of this area if the economy was intact?
Well, the economy being very viable does not mean that people will not be disaffected. And across the country, there are so many areas of disaffection. And what is people are waiting there will just be a trigger. But if the economy is doing well, perhaps it will stem it, but that will not completely solve the problem of, alienation and everything. It's not only economic. And that's why I believe it is complex. And let me say, regard to one thing that Ruben said at the beginning, that it will be dialoguing with terrorists. It's actually a very difficult situation. All the countries that face issues of violent extremism have to face the fact that what do you do? What will be the next option? You are not likely to say, get 2 million people that are involved on all this and kill all of them. It's not possible. You're also not likely to say, put them in life imprisonment. It's not possible. So at a point, you have to embark on some form of efforts at reintegrating them into the society. And often a precursor to that reintegration is to evolve strategies of de-radicalization. In other words, to help them to abandon their extremist views. Does it work? It is very controversial. Nobody knows if it works or not. For example, those who are part of the program will paint a very rosy picture of how it has succeeded. Those who are from outside will feel very angry. Why are you rehabilitating the terrorists and even not even including the victims? And even if they do not reoffend, you cannot say it's because you have de-radicalized them. It could be because of other reasons. And if they even reoffend, you cannot say it's because, oh, hey, I told you they shouldn't be forgiven. There could be other impulses that drive them into another form of offending. So it is a very complex thing in conflict management, whether it works, or de-radicalization works. But the one thing that's certain is that there's no alternative. If we all agree that you cannot kill all of them, even those that surrender, you cannot kill all of them. You cannot say those that have been involved, maybe associated with them, kill them. It's simply not a solution. So the issue is, what is the alternative? And that's where the issue of political solution comes. But the nature of that political solution is what needs to be discussed. And when we are too much reacting, then that's a problem. There are several hotspots in the country. There are several drivers of conflicts. And the government will just keep quiet. And Nigeria, when I say government, I don't mean only the federal. It goes down to state, to local governments. They will just keep quiet until there's a conflagration, then there's a fire brigade approach. And once there's conflagration, other elements are sucked into it so that it mutates, and it becomes more difficult to solve. So what we have to do is also to be able to, and I see people talking about it all, the early warning systems, be able to, be one step ahead of it. We are talking about 2023, for example. We can see elements. We can see there are groups that are feeling really very strongly excluded. And the fact of some people may be coming out and say, I'm going to run for president again. You don't understand how that impacts or how that makes some people feel. And that's also at the state level. There are also people that are excluded. That's only for struggle for power. And that goes for other dimensions, environmental struggle. So the issue of justice and fair play is integral to any form, anything, any kind of solution you want to bring in conflict situations.
Well, I mean, you talked about the limitations that Nigeria faces, the fact that the crisis continues to mutate. You also talked about fire brigade approach.
Yeah.
But one other issue that Edward Callum brought up was the issue of the humanitarian crisis in the northeastern part of the country, which the federal government also needs to address. And he referred to certain elements that can restore trust, hope, and help to build peace. Now, what are those elements, in your opinion, that the Nigerian government will need to focus upon to build trust, to restore hope, and to ensure peace, which, according to him, is the lasting solution to the crisis?
Well, I don't want us to get into this very simplistic thing that if you check this box and check this box, it will be solved. It's for as long as this solution will mutate, some of them will take care of themselves with time. Others will require military solution. And others, that's why I say some are working, some are not working. If the government pari passu is using military solution and using carrots, some will work, it will not work for everybody. The challenge will always be there is an opportunity cost. If you use carrots to incentivize people from bad behavior, that carrot, that incentivizing people to stop a particular form of bad behavior, might itself become an incentive for other people to embark on bad behavior. So it is not very a straightforward thing. But the issue of justice, finding out why are people aggrieved, at what point has this crisis, conflict mutated, and in what form? What are the several dimensions? That is why conflict scholars talk about nested theories of conflict. You have to look at it like onions. It might be that the main cause is somewhere, but it then has several layers. And if you go straight to the main cause, you still have to deal with the outer layers. If you want to focus on the outer layers and you have not touched the inner cause, the main cause, it will still not be solved. Some will be pacified at each level. But I see also, for me, a major reason why in some at the macro level, at what we can call the system level of the conflict is the issue of the crisis in the nation-building process. And that crisis has led to what a number of individuals and groups delinking from the Nigerian state and regarding the state itself as the enemy. So you see it everywhere. It's not just IPOB, it's not just Boko Haram. People who are just not feel that the state limits their ability to achieving their potential. It may be just an exaggeration. It may be unnecessary romanticization of an idea. But unless we get the nation-building process right, remember it's called building, which means there should be deliberate use of state instruments to do certain things, to ensure that fair play and justice are in place. If you do not use that deliberate state instruments, then you are missing it. So, and if you don't do it, and that conflict, erupts, it's much more expensive and much more difficult to deal with. So, we have now to go back and find out at the subsystem level, let's say, for example, in the Northeast, what are the grouses? People who are bandits, I think it's blaming it all on the poverty is simplistic, in my opinion. The poverty is an element because there are equally several poor areas and swaths of territories in the country that are very poor, but you don't have banditry. So why? Which means that poverty alone cannot be an explanation, the only explanation. And that's why we say, why? Get them. One of the reasons, I think, one of the things we need to get out from any form of negotiation with the bandits or whoever they are, the people you call terrorists, is what do they really want? Apart from what do they want, you dig deeper to find out, at what point did this dissatisfaction or alienation or the cause of the conflict occur? And then you do a proper analysis using this kind of onions, nested theory of conflict. And you probably will be able to get to that. So when you say multi-pronged, it means some people it might be economic, some might be exclusion, some might just be poverty. So you use all those instruments at the same time, depending again on the ability of the state to, deliver on those.
Indeed, he talked about identity-based conflict, power-based conflict, and resource-based conflict. I'd like us to use what is happening in Kaduna State, Southern Kaduna to be precise, as an example here. What would be the best approach Because what is happening in southern Kaduna seems to have a mix of all of these conflicts, triggers of conflicts.
Well, I don't know about the Kaduna thing is complex. It's always been there. But remember other Ahmed, the other governor, if you have an executive that, chief executive that makes all sections of the community have confidence in him or her, then it will not completely remove the conflict, but it will reduce it. But when a governor is perceived, rightly or wrongly, to be partisan or to not like a particular group, then even when that governor is doing something with the best of intention, it will amount to nothing. People were already taking their own positions against you. Under McAfee, for example, when McAfee was governor, we know that Kaduna State was a different thing. And why? Because I think he was seen more as having good intention. I think it was wrong of El-Rufai to appoint a Muslim as in a state where religion was a major factor. I think it was wrong of him. Whatever he was arguing that governance is not about religion, it's for me not the right thing to do, and that will accentuate a certain feeling that this person is against us. So you have to look at optics. It's not about argument. It's not about being smart. So for as long as people believe that you are not for them, rightly or they may be wrong in their calculation, it's going to be more difficult for him to solve the problem. On the other hand, when people believe that you're doing your best, even when you are not, such itself is salutary to development. I'll give you an example. That is the whole basis of what we call identity politics. Some people from the north, for example, now say they are suffering double, what you can call double jeopardy. They are suffering and they cannot complain because their man is there. Some people will tell you, oh, Buhari is doing his best. Is he going to be everywhere? So the perception that this person is there, Buhari being there is not going to help any mechanic who is from Katsina. But that feeling that, oh, whatever he's doing, I'm sure he has our back, he covers our back, is salutary to development. On the other hand, a belief that this man hates us, rightly or wrongly, means that it becomes difficult for the person to be a conflict manager. That's just the situation that at the level of governance, we should always be very careful to pay particular attention to the role of optics.
The identity part of crisis is something we can't take away. Let's look at the Kaduna crisis, for instance. It's been as old as, even older than the creation of Nigeria itself. Even older than independence of Nigeria, not the creation of Nigeria. I mean, if this happened around the 40s and 50s, and that has been on for quite a while, and we've not been able to find, a lasting solution to this identity crisis. It could snowball into tribal, it could snowball into other affiliations, it could be ethnic or the likes. Then what really is the problem? And is there a silver bullet to solving problems like this? I mean, can people take the same manuscript that we just solved the Ife and Modakeke crisis to just, use on this other situations we've had?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy you mentioned the word identity politics. You can use issue of identity to solve issue of identity politics. And this is because everybody embodies a mosaic of identities. In southern Kaduna, it's religious, let's put it that way. It's more religious than ethnic. So a typical somebody from southern Kaduna is not just maybe Christian, that's only one identity. He's also from Kaduna State. He's probably a journalist. He has other identities. So every individual embodies a multiplicity of identities. It is the identity that is perceived to be under threat that is the one most vociferously defended. So for as long as people do not feel that a particular identity is under threat, they will get along very well with you. So I give you a practical example. If you are in if you are, we all in, say in America, we're all Nigerians. Our identity as Igbo Yoruba doesn't come into play. And we come down to Nigeria, immediately we get back to Nigeria, we become Igbo, Yoruba, and others. However, we also, you can be a Yoruba, you also have something in fellowship with somebody who's a member of your sports club, who is a fellow journalist, who is a fellow, you know, a medical doctor or whatever. So by using identity, finding out, for example, that we are all Kaduna indigenes, and using the issue of justice and fairness that will emphasize on your identity, on other identities that you bear, and that one identity is not being threatened, then that's the way to solve the identity issue. So the best way to solve identity politics, it will always be there, anywhere, as a mobilizational tool. But for as long as that identity is not perceived to be under threat, then it's not going to be politicized. Take for example, this issue for Scottish quest for independence. They've been part of Britain for United Kingdom for about 300 years. So when they organize a referendum, you have one group, they can openly canvass, do I better unite, better together or better apart? So other people will say, look, these are the benefits I derive from being in this union. We are better off. So it becomes a conversation. The same thing happens in Canada with the Quebecans. Each time there is a referendum, the separatists are defeated, because it is clear they will argue that, look, even though we have a separate identity, we are better in this union, in this arrangement. But when there's nothing, when it's rightly or wrongly projected that your particular identity is not good enough, when there is a perception that you're being pushed out or marginalized or excluded from certain arrangements on the basis of your identity, then it's pointless preaching to them. It's a relational thing. It's pointless preaching to them, because any identity that is perceived to be under threat will always be defended. You can be as cosmopolitan as you want to, and you don't want to think about ethnic or identity. The moment tomorrow, as cosmopolitan as my brother Rupen is, you hear that 50 people from Ogun State have been killed by certain people, and he felt that he's not being treated well, the way he should be treated. His identity as an Ogun man will come to the fore. That is the way these things work.
Well, let's interrogate some of the steps that have been taken to address the challenge of banditry. First, you have referred to at least two of them, or in fact all three that I'm going to cite now. First, the example of Katsina State, where the governor, Masari, entered into peace deals with bandits. He did that twice. But at some point, he became so frustrated that he said the peace deal was no longer in place because the bandits did not respect their own part of the bargain. That's one example. And, you know, how do we relate that to the recommendation in some quarters that dialogue could be part of a multi-pronged approach? We have seen dialogue not working in Katsina State. Now, at the federal level, you also referred to this earlier, the federal government, under the banner of de-radicalization, talked about repentant terrorists. Well, can a terrorist really repent?
Yeah.
As the strategy worked, because there have been reports of some, so-called repentant terrorists going back to join the Boko Haram again. And then third, we also have the recommendation from the governor of Benue State, Samuel Otom, who says the way out of this is not just to worry about the ministry, but give every citizen an AK-47, although he talked about responsible citizens. Now, how about that as a solution, for example? I would like you to just comment on these three case studies.
Let me just briefly say this, Brother Ruben. Masari, we have had Masari's version of the story. We haven't had the other side. But let me also tell you that in Zamfara, the governor said the governor feels his own deal with the bandits is working. So in one way we say it's working, but you can also say it is early days. Masari started this in 2016, and after 4 years, I think it was in June he completely pulled out of the arrangement. So If you say it is not working, what's the option? He said they let the military solution. Has purely military solution worked? So somewhere, even in a war, when you defeat your opponents, you still stay in a table, dialogue table, to hammer out the agreements. So I think I'm not sure that Masare's position that they disappointed him. Yes, some people will disappoint you. I'm also not saying that you should go around and just dialogue. But let me give an example of what Yaradua did with amnesty program. You know, at the time the amnesty was put in place, the Niger Delta was a hotspot. Oil production was going down. And I think it was also, in my own opinion, I believe he gave them a deadline, and then those who do not want, who he said, if you don't embrace this by a certain, then whatever you see, you take. And to make sure that he was not accused of descending on, or rather the ethnic dimension is not brought into it, I think he moved too hard on incipient Boko Haram people in 2009. I think he went into overkill. The way I interpreted it was trying to send a coded message, because it was also at that time that he was negotiating with the militants. So would you say that it didn't work? Yes, it worked. And we have to get into a definition of what does it mean to work. And that means what was the expected outcome. It helped to calm down the nerves in the Niger Delta. So if it hasn't worked in Katsina, maybe a combination of the tools. We need to change the combination. It's not only pure negotiation. We have to look at the elements that were combined and see whether something can be added or removed. The same way in Zamfara, we knew how Zamfara was before the governor came. He says he's working. Of course, we may never know the full picture of, you know, the kind of agreements, or maybe in public domains, or maybe just between them. In 2016, when El-Rufai said he paid money, you know, so that they will stop attacking Southern Kaduna, some Fulani elements, did it work? Between 2016, when he said that, and now, was anything different? That's what we can check. And if the level of attacks declined, we can then go, has declined since then, we can go into another question. Is it because of the payment? It's only when you do this kind of analysis, then you will know whether something is working or not. So, and that is, what's the third limb of your, the other one is whether people can really repent. In conflict analysis, there's something they call recidivism, that is the tendency to go back to your sin, or to begin a narrow focus on that is not a true metric for measuring whether your rehabilitation has worked or not. There, as I mentioned, there are several reasons why people can go back to reoffend. It can be new impulses. You can, you know, after being reintegrated, you can be annoyed by other things. Here there are other fears that you can go and radicalize other members of the society. There are always possibilities. They are always there. And even when you say it is successful, that people do not, they no longer reoffend. You cannot even say it is because of the rehabilitation program. It simply could be because they got tired. It could be because there are other incentives in the society they want to be partaking. For example, you know, there are some incentives that are given to people who took part in the program. So it is very difficult. But always the question will be, what will be the alternative? If you do not want to negotiate, what is the alternative? Purely military solution, has it worked? Then we answer the question. So it is, for me, we have to find a combination of tools. It still has to be multi-pronged. Maybe we need to remove some elements in the tools we are using and add others. Maybe we have to reduce a proportion of certain elements and increase others. But to idea that you cannot talk to them, then the only thing we are telling by implication is that if you have been a Boko Haram guy, if you have partaking in some kind of this thing, they should just kill you off.
How about Samuel Otom's AK-47 self-help solution?
Now we look at the U.S. where some people are asked to carry guns. Has it solved the problem of violence in the society? Now, actually, people are of the opinion that if you carry a gun, it increases the propensity for you to be violent. For example, Ruben, if two of us stop in a traffic light and two of us are arguing violently, and you have a gun in your pocket and I have a gun in my pocket, and in the course of that you notice that you're sweating profusely and you want to put your hand in your pocket to bring out your handkerchief, I might think you're reaching out for your gun, and I get out my own and shoot you. So that's one of the things people say, look, this idea of guns, that's just, the carrying guns actually may make the matters worse. In fact, people say that if armed robbers come to your house and they see you with a gun, they'll shoot you. So we don't know. I'm not a fan of guns. I've not touched live gun, and I don't want to be able to be in a position to touch that.
Well, on that note,
I think we should.
Go ahead, complete your sentence.
Okay,
you think we should?
So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, I don't think that, I think the idea of arming every citizen is a very simplistic approach, which will fail.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Adibe. We look forward to seeing you again on The Morning Show. Thank you very much indeed.